Welcome to Simplify to Scale, a show dedicated to helping you scale a high impact and high profit business that you love without all of the complexity and chaos that can keep you trapped in the day-to-day. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and with decades of scaling experience, I know what actually works and what's just hype. So if you are done with all of the one-size-fits-all scaling advice and all of the overnight success promises, and instead you want proven practical strategies that will help you simplify operations, elevate your leadership, amplify profits, and scale sustainably, let's dive in and get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Simplify to Scale show. Today, what I want to talk about is what do you do when your patterns are interrupted and you're no longer wanting to, able to, inspired to meet your commitments? Do the things you said you were going to, deliver on the things that you've been selling, showing up in the way that you've been showing up. What happens when you know that your business needs to change, but you feel trapped in what you have in place? Even on this podcast, which has been going for 4.5 years now, I recorded a live show every single week. Sometimes I record them in advance, but I always have new content for you every week. I'm always present. I always plan around when I'm traveling, so there's always a new show. And you may have noticed recently that you heard from my team instead of me. Hopefully you really enjoyed those sessions where Jessica showed up and Annie joined her, and it was the Jessica and Annie show instead of the Krista and Annie show or the Krista and Jessica show. So they were complete and total rock stars, and I'm so incredibly grateful for them to step in and keep things moving when I was unable to be here. And to my entire team for keeping my entire business moving while I've not been as present since September. And what happened in September is my dad ended up being rushed to the hospital. He had had a surgery earlier in the month. Surgery went well. He came back home and he ended up having an unexpected complication, was having a lot of trouble breathing. And so my mom had rushed him to the hospital. And he ended up having fluid accumulation around his lungs that caused a collapse of one of his lungs and part of the other. And it ended up being an infection that we later learned, much later learned, is sometimes a common side effect of the surgery that he had. It's not necessarily caused during the surgery or by the surgery, but the stress on the body can sometimes have this as like a secondary side effect. We wish we had known that going in, but we didn't. And thankfully, my mom had seen the signs, called 911. My dad ended up going to the hospital. And we assumed that it was going to be something that they were going to treat and he was going to get better and he was going to come back home. My dad was pretty young. He was pretty healthy. And he unfortunately never came back home until he came home on hospice and he passed away on May 9th. We had services for him on May 26th, right on Memorial Day, which we knew would have been really, really special for him. And so these past 10 months have been just a roller coaster ride of emotion. They have been a roller coaster ride of constantly not knowing what's happening, where we had so many different ups and downs, where he would have another surgery. He had so many surgeries. I can't even count how many at this point. And he'd have the surgery and the doctors would be really helpful. And sometimes it would help, sometimes it wouldn't. But without fail, there would be something else that would happen, and then something else that would happen. And he ended up with so many compounding issues that they weren't able to treat it because every treatment for one issue would have had such a negative consequence on one of the other issues that they couldn't use that treatment option. And so despite multiple surgeries, despite a lot of attempts, despite going back and forth between the ICU and one hospital to another and rehab facilities, they were never able to actually help him get better and recover. But we didn't know that. We didn't know that until the very end. We kept thinking that he was going to get better or that he had at least a chance of getting better. And every time we'd see a new series of doctors, they would tell us, well, we think that we can do this and this and this, and that will work, and then we can get him back home. And it didn't end up going that way. But something that became really clear to me as this started happening in September timeframe and more is I need to be present, and I need to be present at a moment's notice. And because of that, I stopped traveling. I stopped traveling right after, I think it was October or November, that was my last trip, and I canceled retreats, I canceled all travel, I stopped taking on new clients because I was really worried about what it would do for my availability and schedule, and I didn't wanna bring new people on and then all of a sudden have to keep canceling things or moving things. And most importantly, I wanted to be present with my dad. I wanted to be there with him, and I wanted to be spending time with my mom and supporting her and supporting my family through all of it. And so I had to take a step back in a pretty big way in my business. And when I was there, my consistency was not there. My consistency was all across the board. I stopped showing up often on social media. There were weeks at a time I didn't send an email. And that might sound silly, but I have sent a weekly email every single week since 2007. This is the first time I broke that streak since 2007. And I had to let that go. It was the first time I didn't record a podcast episode for the podcast, and my team did. And so there were a lot of things that I just had to accept about my normal routine, about the way that I work, about the way that I show up, about the commitments that I made to myself about how I was going to show up, about the plans that I had of when I was going to launch things and things I was going to do. All of it, I had to get okay with letting go. And I had to get okay with not happening or not happening consistently. And that was actually really, really hard for me personally. Harder than maybe it should have been. But the reason for this episode is as I was sharing with people that part of it, that it surprised me, right? Because if I was talking to any client, if I was talking to anybody and they were saying that they felt guilt or that they felt bad or that they felt really unsettled over the fact that they weren't showing up in their business because their dad was sick and potentially not going to get better, I would have told them, like, why are you even thinking about that or worrying about that? You're spending your time where you need to. The rest of it doesn't matter. Like, I know exactly what I would have said, and I would have believed that 100%. And I know that to be true for me too, but it didn't change that feeling of guilt. It didn't change that feeling like I was breaking a commitment that I made. And I don't know who I made this commitment to. I don't think anyone really missed me all that much in the podcast or on social or in my emails. But in the end, I know I spent my time in the right place, and I am so happy about being able to spend that time with my dad. And yet the guilt still existed. And where this conversation has been really interesting as I've talked to clients, as I've talked to peers, as I've talked to friends, is that everyone was sharing that they have their own version of it. And right now, with a lot of businesses in a period of reinvention, whether it's major reinvention or minor reinvention, trying to adapt to changing market conditions, trying to figure out what on earth is going on if you're in the US. Yeah, I won't even say any more about that. But just right, there's a lot that people are trying to figure out. And sometimes the pause in the routine, the pause in what you do and how you work causes you to look at things with fresh eyes. It causes you to change your perspective, causes you to realize, like, maybe I didn't want to be doing that anyway. Maybe that thing that I just show up and do over and over and over again, because it's what I've done for years or decades, isn't actually the most effective thing or the thing that I want to be doing anyway. And so a lot of people are in this place where they're considering making changes, they're actively making changes, or they're making some pretty radical changes. I don't know anybody who's not in a state of change in some way, shape, or form, right? Some businesses are absolutely thriving and the change is very positive. A lot of people I talk to, though, whether they're thriving or whether they're trying to figure it all out, it's very much a place of introspection. It is very much a place of reflection and looking at, what do I actually want? How do I want to show up? Where do I want to show up? What do I want to sell? How do I want to deliver this? How much do I want to work? What role do I want to play? Who are the people I want around me from a team perspective and from a client perspective? People are using this kind of what I'll call disruption to how business worked a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, as a means of getting much more clear on what feels right for them going forward. And that in and of itself is a beautiful thing. But what I've heard is so many people feel a lot of guilt. And they had that same type of feeling that I had, but in different context, right? I've sold this program for years and I really don't want to sell it anymore. And what are my clients going to think? What are all the people who haven't enrolled yet going to think who are waiting for me to launch it? So they feel like they've made a commitment to the market with this thing that they've sold, and then they feel guilt about wanting to let it go and wanting to reimagine it. Some people want to get rid of their entire team. They're looking around and saying, "This isn't the business I want. I built this big, big team. They're all here to work in a way that I don't want to work anymore. They're here to sell in a way I don't want to sell anymore. And they're here to deliver things I don't even want to deliver anymore." And they feel guilt about that. They feel pressure about that. They made a commitment to these people. They pay these people. What's going to happen if they let them go? Other people are feeling super done with social media. I talk about that one a lot because I probably get the social media question every day of my life from somebody is, do I really need to be on social media? But a lot of people are not liking what's going on some of the platforms and not wanting to be there. Maybe you feel that way too. Or you're seeing that like your one safe platform, the one that you felt was good is starting to change. It's just everything changes all the time. It's cyclical, it's business, it happens, new things come, old things die, old things change. It's just kind of the nature of things, but it can be very disorienting and disrupting. And sometimes it can be a really beautiful thing as much as it can feel really chaotic in the process. And so here's a few questions that I've been asked in these conversations. I literally started writing them down because I realized that almost everybody I talked to had their own version of this guilt. I got asked, does this make me look inconsistent or uncommitted if they stop doing the things and showing up consistently in the way that they always did? A fear that I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be on this platform anymore, or I don't want to send this anymore. Or I don't want to produce this in this way anymore. But a fear of, will I look inconsistent or uncommitted? And so worried about what others will think. And so continuing to do it, even though it feels no longer aligned. Am I giving up too soon? Maybe I should stick it out when someone realizes that an offer is not really aligned and not what they want. Shouldn't I be grateful to even have this opportunity? That one I heard different versions of from a lot of people. I will say some of the businesses that I talk to, some of the biggest guilt that they feel is being successful when they look around and see other people struggling. Some of my clients are definitely in the figure it out place, but some of them are doing really well. And those that are doing well, as much as they're happy, they do have this feeling of guilt. Some of them are really quiet about how well they're doing because they don't want others to know that they're doing well because they see so many other businesses frustrated and struggling. So they feel like they need to keep going or keep doing things that maybe they don't want to because they have an opportunity that they see other people not having. So they feel like they should just be grateful to have it. A few people have said things like, I mean, I really don't want to, but it works. So why stop something that's working? And one of the big ones was, what if people stop taking me seriously or forget about me? And so I wanted to remind you that business changes and your business can change. People change and you can change within your business. You can change what you want. You can change what feels right and what feels aligned for you. You can change the vision that you have. You can change who you want to work with. You can change who you want to spend time with from a team perspective, from a client perspective, from a partner perspective. You can change what you want to sell and how you want to deliver it. This is your business. You built it. You have the freedom of choice what you do with it. And the one thing that I always encourage is make the smart business decision from a sense of, if you do know you're going to let something go, if you do know that it's time to move on from something or to cut something, to look at it strategically and how you build the bridge from where you are today to the change that you want to make. So it's not like ripping a band-aid off and actually damaging the overall success of your business in the long run. I will put that out there because I have seen many people do the like burn it all to the ground type energy and then really regret it afterwards. So give yourself the benefit of building the bridge and investing the thought and the care and making sure that you're transitioning something out or transitioning people out or transitioning whatever you need to out in the best possible way. But you do not need to keep anything that no longer feels aligned, whether it's working or not. You do not need to pursue an opportunity just because you have one where other people don't. You do not need to keep showing up out of fear of people thinking you're inconsistent or uncommitted or no longer there if you stop. And you don't need to keep doing anything that's no longer working or even that is, but that you just don't want to do anymore. And most of all, you don't have to feel guilty about these changes, right? If you have something going on personally, like I did, that disrupts the way you work, that disrupts what you do, that causes you to pivot plans and have other people take things on that you never intended them to take on, or to say no to things that you would have loved to do under any other circumstance, but you couldn't. You don't need to feel guilty about that either. I'm still working through that one myself, so I know it's very easy to say, and it's another thing to actually fully embody. But everybody is feeling some version of this that I've been speaking to lately, so I suspect you might be a little bit too. And whether you have to let things go temporarily or let things go permanently, you need to make the decision that's right for you. The decision that was right for me was spending time with my dad and saying F it to everything else in my business. It was not as important. Even though those things were important to me, they were not as important as time with my dad. And when you think about the things and the decisions that you have to make, the things that you might want to be letting go of, I'm sure they feel important, but they might not be as important as what you feel called to next. And so give yourself the space to get clear on what you want and give yourself the permission to make the changes that you want and give yourself the freedom to not feel the guilt and not worry about letting other people down or worry about what other people think. I truly believe that when we do what is aligned for us, and when we do that from a place of deep, genuine alignment, that it all works out in the end. And sometimes we need to let the things go to create the space for what actually matters most. So thank you for your patience as I have been a bit absent lately. I'm excited to be back with you. I'm excited to be reintegrating as I'm still navigating this whole new world that I live in now. I hope this episode was exactly what you needed to hear this week. And please share it with anyone else who you know may be going through something similar or feeling some of those very same feelings. And I will see you again next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Simplify to Scale. If you'd like to take things further, I invite you to join me for my Scale Smarter, Not Harder interactive workshop. Head to strategicopsinstitute.com/scale smarter to get registered. Not only will we dive into what might be keeping you trapped in the day-to-day, but you'll have the opportunity to ask me your questions live. If you got value out of today's episode, I'd love if you'd take a moment and rate and review the show so more businesses can learn to scale more simply and sustainably. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you again next week.